What's going on, guys? It's the Dividend Bloodhound here in my first ever live YouTube video. Now, this is completely new to me. I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm used to having a million takes. So I'm just going to roll with it and we will see what happens. Right, in today's video, we are going to talk about HS2. There's been a lot of talk in the news lately about how HS2 in the UK is going to cost us an absolute fortune, to the tune of £106 billion. Now, that is an absolutely insane amount of money for any country to spend on anything. Hi, Growing Dividends. Nice to see you there. This is my first ever live video, so do bear with me. We are going to talk about HS2, back on track, and it's going to be the high-speed rail link between London, Birmingham, Manchester, Leeds, and then eventually onwards to Scotland. Now, the idea of HS2 is to cut down the amount of time it takes to get between these places. That's the whole point, and increase capacity on what is already overstretched lines in the UK. So the idea is that the journey between Birmingham and London goes down to 38 minutes instead of being the hour and 15 minutes that it is now. And the journey from London to Manchester goes down to 1 hour, 7 minutes. And then the journey from London to Edinburgh cuts down to 3.5 hours or 3 hours, 40 minutes. That is an incredible reduction in the time it'll take to be absolutely anywhere in the country. And I do genuinely believe that it is worthwhile. It's been mismanaged. HS2 Limited has properly made a pig's ear of trying to get this in shape. But I do believe that the premise of it is actually right. We've already spent £8 billion on it now. Now, you would have saw that Boris Johnson reviewed it recently, and ultimately, the government has decided to press ahead with it. Now, there's a lot of people on both sides of the fence, within the Conservative Party, within the Labour Party, all vying for whether this is a good thing, whether it's a bad thing. Could £106 billion be spent better elsewhere? And I would argue that although there are perhaps pressing cases, like you could always make a pressing case like the NHS or the military or anything along them lines, you simply can't underestimate transport infrastructure. This railway line is going to take us forward into the next century, basically, and it's going to allow for 300,000 more people a day to use 300,000 more people a day to use our train network. That's 100 million people, or the whole country's population, using the railway every single year. And that's on top of our infrastructure that we've got in place already. And the country needs this infrastructure. We've not built any railways in this country for proper railway lines, barring London, since the Victorian times, and we simply need to move with the times. Now, the job creation is another economic thing that you could argue the point for here, is that by 2020, there's going to be 15,000 jobs created by HS2. There's already 8,000 that have been created already. And then by construction peak, which is going to be in the late 2020s, 2030s, it's going to be at 30,000 people. 30,000 people employed. That's going to be a huge economic boost to this country. Growing Dividends, I'm actually on YouTube at the moment, live streaming this from YouTube for the first time. I did pop on Instagram before to do a little plug, a little advert to say that I was going live. But I'm very much on YouTube at the moment for the first time. Let's see how this goes. So 30,000 people employed at its peak, and these are people from all professions. So you're going to have engineers, construction workers, marketers, HR teams, managers, project managers. All of these people are going to get trained. They're going to spend their money in the UK economy. They're going to get trained up, and they're high-skilled jobs. They're high-skilled jobs that are going to boost this country going forward. Now, talking about phase one of the project, This is the link between Birmingham and London. That is now looking at completion in about 2028, 2031. So still at least 10 years away. Now this has benefit for me personally, because I have 2 flats in Birmingham that are going to be within potentially 10 minutes drive of a HS2 station, the Birmingham interchange. So I'm hoping to take advantage of the situation, and it was a small factor in me buying the flats in the first place. So I'm hoping to gain some growth and appreciation in my properties through the links to HS2. To be able to get to London in 38 minutes is just incredible. People pay a fortune at the moment to be within an hour of London, and essentially you could live in Birmingham but still easily be within an hour of London, and that's an incredible opportunity. I'm hoping that I will benefit a little bit from that in my properties. I'm going to come on to UK stocks in another part of this video. I've got it down on my little notice board. I will talk about that shortly. One thing I will say is Balfour Beatty has been given a £1.5 billion contract so far for infrastructure work for the project, and there's a couple of other companies and a couple of train companies that I will talk about in a minute that might stand to benefit. Bearing in mind this is a huge project, so it's going to benefit these companies over years and years and years. So yeah, phase 1 is London to Birmingham. That's due for completion in 2028 to 2031. Then phase 2, the project breaks in 2. So one line goes off to towards Manchester, towards Crewe and Manchester, and the other line goes off towards Leeds, and then eventually onwards from there off to Scotland. And this is very long term. You're talking the middle of the century by the time it actually gets done. You've got to start somewhere, guys, and we have to start putting the money in now. Otherwise, the cost is just going to go up and up and up and up. Yeah, it's only £5 of Balfour Beatty in my portfolio, but it's gone up by about 8% since they've actually announced that the project is going ahead. I should have bought more, really, but I didn't have any money. Hey ho! But I will be definitely investing more into that. And now onto my logic of, or my personal opinion on why HS2 should go ahead. Not only personally for me, excuse me, not only personally for me for my flats that I own, but as a country as a whole, we need more capacity. Everybody is always, I don't want to say moaning, but everybody is always saying we need more trains, we need more this, we need more that. And the current lines can't be upgraded anymore. You can't fit, from what I understand, going on HS2's website and doing my own research, we can't fit any more trains on the infrastructure that we've got. We can't make the tunnels bigger because that'll be too expensive. We can't put any more trains on because the timetables are already full. So you need a new train line. It's as simple as that. You need more track to run trains on. Now, hopefully, HS2 is a completely separate line, so that will ease the pressure on the existing lines when it's built. And as I've already said, 300,000 people every day will be able to use this. And guess what? Then people aren't going to be on the other line, so that will free up some capacity on that line. And they're also arguing that some people might even use their cars, or not use their cars, should I say, and get the train instead, because A, it'll be quicker, and B, they might be conscious of their carbon footprint. So that might actually be beneficial for us as a whole in terms of the environment, and that is another HS2 argument. Freight trains are something that everybody forgets about. Like, there are so many freight trains on our current infrastructure at the moment that move ferry goods backwards and forwards all across the country at all times of the day. They're sort of fed into the existing timetables or in the middle of the night, so you don't even know it's happening. And they save hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of lorries being on the road. Now, HS2 will allow that to happen again threefold, because they'll be able to use that track in the middle of the night to move goods all around the country very, very quickly. Obviously, they won't be on high-speed trains, they'll be on freight trains. They'll be able to use it at quiet times to move goods around. And guess what that means? Less lorries on the road, less CO2 being produced, against the environment, and also more space on the roads. We all hate driving behind lorries. You know, how many times you go down an A road and there's a lorry tanking along, and then that lorry pulls out, and then guess what? You're stuck doing 50 miles an hour because this lorry driver wants to get past that lorry driver, and it takes him 6 miles to do so. And anything that might make that a little bit less is a really good thing, in my opinion. Now, HS2 won't be the be-all and end-all. It's not going to end everything. There's still going to be trucks on the road, but it might actually reduce them. And we're consuming more and more and more and more goods in this country. And there is an argument to be based on, well, why do we hate lorries so much? I mean, we hate them, but at the same time, we depend on them. Because without lorries, we don't get our goods, we don't get our food, we don't get medicine, we don't get anything. So while hating on lorries, you've actually completely dependent on them all at the same time. Now, onwards to the environment. I've already mentioned that HS2 might reduce the carbon footprint of the UK by taking lorries off the road and getting people from their cars into trains, etc. There's also like an environmental case, a bad environmental case being made for HS2 as well. It's literally just going to bulldoze through forests, green fields, people's houses, all sorts. And that is a terrible thing, like to have environment, forest, ancient forests ripped up. But at the same time, we need to develop, we need to get this infrastructure sorted. And it's got to go somewhere. It's always going to affect someone. And I hope that they compensate people properly for their property that's damaged. I do hope that they compensate people properly for that, and it looks like they are. But at the same time, there's always going to be some issues there. Now, what HS2 has said that they're going to do is, where they can, to avoid damaging the environment, they're going to build the line underground. And it's quite expensive, hence the cost of the project, but at least that will do less damage to the environment. And then when it actually comes out and there's no other, there's no other route for it to take but go through a forest or but go through a field, they want to try and replace as much as they can of the forest that they destroy or where they've got to do damage to the environment. If you look on HS2's website, they actually say that they're going to plant 7 million trees to compensate for the trees that they've destroyed, and they're going to build a 30 square kilometre green corridor alongside the track. And if they can, they're going to either build it, as I said, underground, or build it in like a bit of a valley as well to stop the noise and all that. They're also building green bridges so the wildlife can get from one side to the other, also get from one side to the other without being steamrolled by a train going at about 120 miles an hour. So I do like the fact that at least HS2 is trying to mitigate its footprint. I know it's going to cause trouble, and I get that there's probably people out there that will hate on me for this, but look at what we're doing here in this country. Can you imagine what would happen in China if China wanted to build a railway line? They'd just go the direct route, no matter what was in the way. They'd blow mountains up, they'd drill holes in everything, they'd throw human lives at it. They don't really care so much for the environment. And at least we are trying. At least HS2 is trying. I get that it's going to do damage, but at least they're trying. Hi, Luke Allen. Just to give you a little shout out there. Thank you very much for looking at my channel. And yes, I am a fellow Brummie, actually. Yeah, definitely. From Sheldon by Birmingham Airport originally, but I now live in Newbury and I work in Portsmouth, so I'm all over the shop. Anyway, back to what I was originally saying. So, environmental factors, I believe at least HS2 has tried to mitigate against these as best it can, bearing in mind it is the biggest infrastructure in Europe. At least they've tried to mitigate the damage that they're going to do. I'm now going to move on to some of the stocks that could potentially be boosted by HS2's being given the go-ahead and the receiving a portion of this essential £6 billion that's going to be spent. So as already mentioned, we're in touch with growing dividends there. Balfour Beatty is a infrastructure company based in the UK, and it's responsible for building all sorts, roads, railways, commercial buildings, residential buildings. It does all of these things pretty well. But a key thing to note is it hasn't included HS2 in its confirmed projects yet, because up until recently it wasn't even confirmed. So I bought in just when I started to get an inkling, albeit it's only a fiver. Yeah, I get it. But I bought into the stock when I had an inkling that it was going to go ahead, and the stock price jumped 10% on getting the go ahead from the government. I wish I bought more, but £5's all I had. So that's that. Hi, Easy Wealth Building. It's really lovely to see you following me live. Thank you very much for tuning in on my first ever live video. Balfour Beatty is roughly £2.80 a share at the moment, I believe. The stock price did jump 10% when on the announcement of HS2 news, which is a company that's going to benefit over the next 30 years, I would say, on the building and completion of HS2. The other companies that I would mention are Siemens, Alstom and Bombardier. Now, I mentioned all three of them because they haven't actually chosen or given the contract out for the trains yet. So there's still a competition going on as to which company is actually going to produce these trains. Now, the contract is worth £2.5 billion as an initial contract. I lost my train of thought. Yeah, so the contract's worth £2.5 billion for the trains. But the company that produces them hasn't been chosen yet. So you've got a choice of Siemens, Alstom or Bombardier. I definitely know Siemens is publicly listed and is on the, you can definitely get it on the Trading 212 app. Because I'm following it on there. I haven't bought into it yet, but it's definitely on there. Alstom and Bombardier, I'm not sure about. I haven't looked into them. I'd have to look into them later. There's also four other infrastructure. Don't know why I did that. There's four other infrastructure companies out there and construction companies: Murphy, Elon, Mace, and Rupp. They've all been given contracts worth up to £1 billion each for construction of certain parts of the line. Now, they might not necessarily have started work on that yet. Might not have actually started work on it yet, but the contract has definitely been placed, so they stand to benefit from the money that's been allocated to them. Again, I can't, or when I looked on Free Trade and Trading 212, I couldn't see any of them four companies on there, so I would stand by on that one. They may be publicly listed, but they're not on Trading 212 or Free Trade. Growing dividends, you did miss a little bit about the stocks, but all I talked about was Siemens, which is on Trading 212. They're potentially one of the companies that's going to benefit from building the trains, and that will be a £2.5 billion contract when the contract is announced. So you'd have to stay tuned and see whether the trains are actually built or not. As for the others, I'm not sure if they're publicly listed, and Murphy, Elon, Mace and Rupp aren't publicly listed, I don't think, or available on the apps. So you'd have to try through a different app store or a different broker to get that sorted. And that about wraps me up for today. I'm going to just sign off by saying that I definitely agree with HS2. I think it's definitely a thing that should go ahead and is really good for this country going forward. And definitely, would I say it's worth £106 billion? Probably not, being as a taxpayer as we are. But over the next 20 or 30 years, it won't actually cost that much, and it should actually benefit the country as a whole. It personally benefits me because I'm going to buy shares. I'm going to buy stocks in a company that stands to benefit from HS2, and I also own 2 flats that will be within 5 to 10 minutes of a HS2 station as well. 2 flats within 5 minutes of a HS2 station, so I'll get the capital appreciation from that. Bearing in mind there will be less than 40 minutes from London. And yeah, that wraps me up for today. I would like to just say peace out, and that wraps up my first ever live YouTube video. Thank you very much for tuning in, and I'll catch you in the next one. Goodbye.